Once you got to the end of the like tasks to do with like push-ups, then you have to work on it like 3 times. And we needed to keep everything. I know.
Thank you, Juan. Beautiful. Good morning. Whoa. On this chilly, blustery morning, just wait. My name's Jerry Fry. I'm happy to serve as the worship associate today and to welcome you here. I invite us all to take a deep breath and center ourselves. With these words from Reverend Beth that call us to gather. We gather on this cold January day seeking the warmth of community, trusting in our shared commitments to promote justice and seek peace. We come with hearts filled with joy and weighed with worry for all that we face in these coming days. And we gather to remember that we are not alone. We join a cloud of witnesses, a legion of ancestors who remind us that countless before us have faced perilous times. We gather to remember, in the words of Dr. King, that human progress never rolls in on wheels of inevitability. It comes through the tireless efforts of those of us who know that the time is always ripe to do right. Though we may be tired and weary and worried, may this time together renew our spirits and call us ever forward to liberation and love. Let us come fully into this time and place together. A flaming chalice has been a symbol of Unitarian Universalists for many decades. And we join our siblings in faith each Sunday by lighting our chalice here in the sanctuary. For those joining us online, welcome. I invite you to light a candle or chalice in your own space as we share these words by Reverend Sandra Fees. For the stories that long to be told and retold, for the stories that long to be imagined and reimagined, for the stories that long to be envisioned and celebrated, we kindle this chalice. May its flame bring the light of different truths, different paths, and different voices. All need to cultivate a transformative story of justice, love, and beauty. And now please rise in body or spirit for our opening song, number 1028. Fire, and this is in your teal hymnal, Fire of Commitment.
Guiding hands and hearts and spirits into faith set free from fear. Let the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze. May our hunger and our passion be to call us on our way. Burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment, and our future can begin. From the stories of our living rings a song both brave and free, calling pilgrims witness to the life of liberty. When the fire of commitment sets our demands a deeper justice built by our courageous choice. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, hunger and our passion be to call us on our way. And we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, in a promise of fulfillment, and our future can begin.
Thank you, everyone, for that singing. Well, good morning, folks. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Urbana-Champaign. We are a people of many different histories, bodies, identities, genders, theologies, and beliefs. And we are united in our commitment to our mission to build community, seek inspiration, promote justice, and find peace. My name is Reverend Beth Monholland. My pronouns are she, hers, and I have the deep joy of serving as the lead minister to this congregation alongside our associate minister, Reverend Sally Fritchie. I'm so glad you've decided to join us on this very cold January morning on the eve of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day. It's so lovely to see so many of you, and I trust that today, no matter how cold you might be, no matter the worries you might be carrying, this service will bring you what your heart needs. I want to bid a special welcome to any guests who have joined us this morning. If this is your first or second time with us and you would like to stay connected and get more information about the congregation, please do complete a connections card and drop that in the offering plate or leave it at the welcome table so that we can get you in our database and make sure you stay connected to us. As I mentioned, we are a congregation of many ages, which means that we embrace all of the noises and potential disruptions that little ones can bring into a service. Children are welcome to stay here in the sanctuary for the entire service, but our REE, our Religious Exploration and Engagement Program, does start up again today. So kids and youth and all of our volunteers will be invited to go to their classrooms immediately following the time for all ages, which is marked in your order of service. If you have little ones under 5 who might need to just play and have a little more wiggle room, the nursery is also available. And speaking of wiggle room, if you're feeling a bit crowded here in the sanctuary and would like to stretch your legs or just have a little more breathing space, you are welcome to join the live stream of the service, which is across the entryway in Fellowship Hall. And I'm going to use Lucy here, who's in the front, as an example. She's shy. If you want to keep your hands busy, no matter your age, we have coloring and activity packets right by the entryway doors. You're welcome to get one of those at any time. Everyone, did I say this already, is also invited to join us in Fellowship Hall after the service for coffee and conversation. We hope you will join us there. This morning, we are also having our monthly book and magazine exchange. So if you feel like you don't have enough books in your house, you can take some home with you today. I hear from your laughter that some of you do indeed have enough books in your house. I don't think there is any such thing, but okay. Thank you again for being with us this morning. And one thing I forgot. I do always like to remind us we are living in endemic times, and it is, y'all, the very middle of winter. There are so many germs floating around. If you are a person who is much more comfortable wearing masks, you are always welcome to wear a mask in this space. And we have color-coded lanyards in the entryway. The yellow and red ones indicate visually to folks that you would just like to maybe keep your distance while you're also maintaining community. Respecting each other's boundaries is one way that we build community and hold each other in care. And with that being said, let me welcome you once again into this space. I invite you to take a breath. Feel yourself here in this room, in the rooms you are joining us in online, and let us enter into some story time. I mentioned that it is Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day tomorrow, and I debated telling you a story. Some of you would already know it. Some of you might know it you'd be hearing it for the first time, of Dr. King. But today's service is called The Center Never Holds. And what I wanted to do instead is a fun little activity to get us to think about what does a middle ground, a center position, sometimes ask us to do. And so I have two very short stories, and I need just a couple of volunteers to come up and maybe stand, well, where people can see you, like right here maybe. Sure. Hands went up in the back. I can't see who it is because the light is going at me. And Renata can come up. Yep, come on up, y'all. You just got to stand. I'm going to ask you to do a thing. Mostly it's standing here. Yeah. Everyone, I am so surprised that the children of our congregation want to participate. Hi, you all. Que fantastico. Yup. Oh my gosh. This makes me beyond happy. All right, everybody. I'm gonna give you two scenarios, two events, and you are gonna have to help me decide, and everybody in this room decide what is the best thing to do. So first, because it's really cold out in winter, have any of you gone sledding or hiking in the snow? Do any of you ever go ice skating? Okay, well, I'm glad for your excitement. We are actually not going to go ice skating for real today, but we're going to pretend. Here's what we're going to do. Can you play pretend with me for a minute? So here's the pretend. All of us are out for a walk in the snow when it's not quite as cold as it is today. Oh my gosh. Who even needs prompts? And we come across, so as we're walking, we are on the path. It opens up, and there's a clearing in the woods, and there's a pond out there, and there's some people out on the pond. And we wave at them and say, hi, people out on the pond. And they say to us, hey, you should come out on this pond with us. And then you say, well, we don't have any ice skates because we're out for a hike. But they say, it's okay, you can just walk on the pond. Yep, Amelia? Amelia says if she received that invitation to come out onto the pond, she would say, are you sure it's safe? How many other people would join Amelia and ask, are you sure it's safe? All right, a bunch of hands are up. They would want to know if it's safe. Well, Amelia, you did ask them, are you sure it's safe? And they said, no, but come on out anyway. And then you said, I don't think so. And they said, no, we really want you to. And then Winona noticed that there were cracks in the ice. And Winona said to Amelia, there's cracks in this ice. And so Amelia, who is now the spokesperson for the group, shouted back to the people and said, hey, there's cracks on the ice. You should come off. And do you know what those folks said? Can you guess? They were like, no, we think you should come over here onto the ice and talk to us about it. And so my question for you is, do you compromise and go out on the ice and talk to them, or stay on the safe, not cracked land? Can you tell which option I want you to take? For everyone who cannot hear, especially those online, Amelia is not going to go out on the ice, but she might find something that she could put out on the ice in case something bad happens, that those people could come off the ice. That's a pretty good plan. Camden. We have one more pretend activity for you, but one last statement. What do you have to say about the ice? That's right. He is going to try to help people get off the ice, even if they don't want to, because there's cracks in that ice, everybody. Oh, the wisdom of children. Who even needs a minister? All you need is kids. All right. I have one more activity for you. I have 2 glasses of water here. Okay, here's the choice. It's a really, really hard one. This is just water. This is poison. And Winona, you're going to be my prompt in this one. Winona's like, I don't think it's really poison, even though Reverend Beth just told me it is, so I think we should all drink this. And Evie's like, I think we should only just take the water and not that poison. So do you think there's a compromise where maybe we take just a little poison? No. You are all absolutely correct. Sometimes when folks are like, I have an opinion and an idea, and I think you should listen to me, what we need to do is work together and really say, but is that, what Amelia said, is that a good idea? Is this safe? Is this in the best interest of everybody? So that when we do that, we don't fall in the ice and we don't drink poison. Correct. Yay! These are just water. I'll prove it. Just water. All right, you all. Thank you. Thank you for being wise. Thank you for coming along on our activities. And you are welcome to go to your classrooms now. Bye, everybody. Our kids, our volunteers can all head to their classrooms. They're going to keep us all safe, everybody. I love it. Thank you, grown-ups. And to all of the grown-up caretakers who are going to have to be talking about ice skating and poison water later, I do apologize. And your kids got it, so good work, caretakers. As the last of our little ones and volunteers leaves the space, we come into our time for our ritual of joys and sorrows. We know that when we gather each week, we are always, each of us, carrying our entire lives here in our bodies and making space together in community to lay down our burdens and to lift up our joys together is an act of spiritual generosity. We'll share joys and sorrows aloud later in the service, and so if you do have something you'd like shared aloud, you can fill out a card, bring it up to the chalice table, submit it via email. But in this time together, we will, as we are called and feel moved to do so, either come to the table in the center of the room or here in the front and lay a stone for our sorrows into the bowl of water and trust that just as that stone is held in water, we and all that we sorrow are held here in community. And for the joys that we would like to lift up, to float, to have multiplied in community, you're invited to lay a petal into the water. See how that is held, just as you are held. We will sing our blessing song, May the Longtime Sun. The words will be on the screen. If you would like to sing it, you are welcome to. If you want to let the music just wash over you, to take that in, you're invited to do that also. I am going to light an additional candle on the chalice table this morning for all of the people in Los Angeles who in the last week have lost lives, have lost homes, who are facing unprecedented for them destruction. I want to hold the space, light a candle for that grief. I know many people in this room, people watching us online, directly know folks affected by the fires in Los Angeles. So whatever grief and worry you might be carrying for your friends and loved ones, know that we share that with you. The candle this morning will also be a bittersweet joy for the ceasefire in Gaza. After more than a year of destruction, I am so grateful that ceasefire has been brokered. I am grateful that the hostages are returning home, and I am still so sorrowful for the tens of thousands of lives that have been lost. Joy and sorrow are so often deeply intertwined. We know that. This ritual this morning honors that. So I will light our candle, and we'll begin to hear our music and sing.
We live our mission at this congregation in many ways. Building community means holding space for our joys and sorrows, and also connecting day to day and week to week through the opportunities both within and beyond our congregation. We invite you to subscribe to and read our weekly e-news to stay up to date on all of the activities offered through our EE program and our social action councils. This morning, I want to highlight a few things. Join us tomorrow at 6 p.m. here in Fellowship Hall to honor Martin Luther King Jr. Day with a watch party of the interfaith service and moral mass meeting featuring religious leaders from across America, including UUA President Reverend Dr. Sophia Betancourt. Our monthly all-ages game night will be hosted in Fellowship Hall on Friday, January 24. All are welcome. Our next Pathways to Membership class is on Saturday, January 25, from 10:30 to 3:30. If you're interested in exploring membership here at UUCUC, register now for this informative and fun event led by Reverend Sally and Sue Stock. And finally, we hope everyone can join us for the formal installation of Reverend Beth as our lead minister. The service will be on February 15 at 1 p.m. The installation committee would appreciate volunteers to help with, and there are quite a few options available for people to sign up for this. See Lynn Wiley in Fellowship Hall There's Lynn waving her folder, her sign-up sheet. See her in Fellowship Hall after the service. Read more details about these and other events in our e-news and check out the full calendar of events in Realm. Each Sunday, in recognition of our very real interdependence and reliance on each other, we pass the plate and share our offering with an organization doing the work of justice in the world. Our shared offering partners for January, Elevated Access, which is a not-for-profit organization launched here in Champaign-Urbana in 2022 in response to the extreme healthcare bans being enacted across the U.S. Since that time, Elevated Access has logged over 1 million miles and over 1,400 flights for passengers needing abortion and gender-affirming health care. Elevated Access is a shining example of an organization that shares and puts into action UU principles of inherent worth and dignity of every person, the right of conscience and justice, equity, and compassion. You can give by text or through the online portal on our website, or if you're here in the sanctuary, the basket will be passed. Checks can be made out to UUCUC, and in the memo put shared offering. Half of what you give will go toward sustaining the work of this church. The other half will go directly to our shared offering partner. We invite you to give whatever is generous for you. This is also the time to submit a written joy or sorrow. And it appears that right now the choir is going to sing. Join us. Holy Toledo. Maybe.
While Jerry gets a drink of water so he can sing with the choir that showed up magically behind him, I want to take this opportunity to let you know that on Wednesday, February 5th, the choir will be having a Bring a Friend to Choir Night. But if you don't know any of these lovely people and you would like to make a friend at choir, you can join us at 7 p.m. right here in this space on Wednesday, February 5th. But now we will sing for you a song that we actually sang already in November called Hope.
If we want hope to survive in this world today, then every day we've got to
Thank you for that. It was fabulous. And thank you all for your generosity, for all the ways that you generously give to this community. And thank you for sharing joys and sorrows aloud. We have several both in person here, and if you have more cards you'd like to bring up to me, you're welcome to do that, and several online. I'll start with this, a concern from David Wolf. David shares, one of my siblings seems to be having some Alzheimer's, and she is afraid to even tell others, not to mention her fear for losing her capacities. A joy from Mick McEnroe that this week marks 2 years since kittens Juniper and Stardust came to live with me. Their companionship, antics, and curiosity bring me joy every day. Kids are the best. A concern from Dana Antonelli. Concern for many creators and small business owners who depend on TikTok, some as their main source of income or as a vital way to connect with customers who don't know what they will do now that they have lost access to this resource. A joy from Janice Ward. Janice shares, I am so blessed to have found this congregation recently. Watching the service from home with my neurospicy kids has been a joyous new tradition. Thank you, Denise. We're glad you're here in all the ways that we make it possible for people to be here. A joy from Lynn Wiley. Lynn says, joy for the church and all of the children who bring their joyous selves. Amen. Love those kids. A concern from Dr. Beth Simpson. Beth says, for friends with family and friends who live in LA, be safe and know you are loved. You are loved. A joy from Charles Walworth. Charles says that on Tuesday he will start his second semester for his master's in public health. Yay, education. Charles, I'm glad you can be joyous about all the reading and the writing in your future over the next few months. A joy from Jerry Carden. Jerry shares, we are thankful for the 32 people who showed up to support our trans and non-binary folks at the LGBTQ and Allies Welcome Team Potluck this past Thursday. We as a congregation need to buoy up our support for trans folks as they face an onslaught of discrimination with the new administration. And that's really from Jerry and Roxy. And a joy from Eric Addix. Eric shares that he's excited that he and his son Dean and Dean's partner Hannah and grandcat Blackie will get to have some FaceTime together later today. Every now and then, I think, I'm a big fan of science fiction. I have been since I was a very small kid, and every now and then, I look at things like the legislation against trans folks, against banning of social media, and I think, oh, we're living in that future I didn't want to be in. And then there's things like Janice can join us online, and Eric can FaceTime his kids, and I'm like, oh, but we're also in that future. We are in the complicated space where all of it is true, where our joys and sorrows, as I said earlier, are so intertwined that we cannot separate them. So thank you. Thank you for bringing your whole selves into this space, this place together. I know I say it every week, but I say it because it's true. This is an act of spiritual generosity. It is how we build community, and I'm grateful for you. And for all that we have spoken aloud today, for all that we carry silently on our hearts, I'd like us to take a moment. I'll ring our chime, and we'll have a minute of silence, a minute of stillness to hold everything and all that we are. Thank you. I'm going to invite Jerry up for a very special reading this morning.
This reading is an excerpt from Letter from a Birmingham Jail. In April of 1963, Dr. King joined a coalition of activists to protest segregation in Birmingham, Alabama. He was arrested, ostensibly for marching without a permit, imprisoned in the Birmingham jail. While there, 8 white religious leaders in the South made a public statement of concern, claiming to support the ultimate goals of King's work, but questioning the methods of the movement. King wrote a letter in response to that public statement, and while he wrote it more than 60 years ago, it rings still true today. If you've never read the full letter, take time this week to do so. This morning, we'll share a short excerpt that speaks to the majority of us here in Urbana-Champaign. Dr. King wrote, "I must make 2 honest confessions to you, my Christian and Jewish brothers. First, I must confess that over the past few years, I've been gravely disappointed with the white moderate. I have almost reached the regrettable conclusion that the Negro's great stumbling block in this stride toward freedom is not the white citizen's counselor or the Ku Klux Klanner, but the white moderate, who is more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice, who constantly says, I agree with you in the goal you seek, but I cannot agree with your methods of direct action, who paternalistically believes he can set the timetable for another man's freedom, who lives by a mythical concept of time, and who constantly advises the Negro to wait for a more convenient season. Shallow understanding from people of goodwill is more frustrating than absolute misunderstanding from people of ill will. Lukewarm acceptance is much more bewildering than outright rejection. I had hoped that the white moderate would understand that law and order exists for the purpose of establishing justice, and that when they fail in this purpose, they become the dangerously structured dams that block the flow of social progress. I had hoped that the white moderate would understand that the present tension in the South is a necessary phase of the transition from an obnoxious negative peace to a substantive and positive peace in which all men will respect the dignity and worth of human personality. I had also hoped that the white moderate would reject the myth concerning time in relation to the struggle for freedom. Time itself is neutral. It can be used either destructively or constructively. More and more, I feel that the people of ill will have used time much more effectively than have the people of goodwill. We will have to repent in this generation, not merely for the hateful words and actions of the bad people, but for the appalling silence of the good people. Human progress never rolls in on wheels of inevitability. It comes through the tireless efforts of men willing to be co-workers with God, and without this hard work, time itself becomes an ally of the forces of social stagnation. We must use time creatively in the knowledge that the time is always ripe to do right. Now is the time to make real the promise of democracy and transform our pending national elegy into a creative psalm of brotherhood. Now is the time to lift our national policy from the quicksand of racial injustice to the solid rock of human dignity.
Thank you, Jerry. I want to go back a little further in our history this morning. More than a century before Dr. King wrote that letter, in 1850, the Fugitive Slave Act was passed here in America, a piece of compromise legislation that was signed into law by President Millard Fillmore, who was a Unitarian. The Fugitive Slave Act empowered both states, federal government, and private citizens to capture any Black person they encountered roaming around freely, minding their own business, living their lives, and whether or not they could prove that they were an enslaved person or a free person, they were sent back to the South. That compromise took months and months to even get there, and we'll come back to that later. But that Fugitive Slave Act in 1850 became a point, as you can imagine, of deep contention and concern for the abolitionists in the North. And Reverend Theodore Parker, who was a Unitarian minister, an ardent, deeply committed abolitionist, argued against the Fugitive Slave Act. Theodore Parker was so committed to abolition, committed to disobeying that what he considered an unjust law, that he actually housed a Black woman in his own house, hiding her from, ironically enough, the fugitive commissioner who was a member of a Unitarian church across town who had been commissioned to come and take her back to slavery. Parker and others hid her and made sure she eventually found her way to freedom in England. Parker was criticized often for his immoderate stance. He was influenced by other abolitionists such as William Lord Garrison and Aidan Ballou, who was a Universalist minister who became a Unitarian minister and who in 1837 joined, in his own words, belatedly, he said, the calls for immediate abolition of the institution of slavery. In 1837, Aidan Ballou wrote an astounding speech that he gave the 4th of July that year in Milford, Massachusetts, where he broke down every argument that could support slavery as an institution, every objection about why African Americans shouldn't be free, arguments that were still being used, by the way, 150 years later when Dr. King wrote that letter from a Birmingham jail. Aidan Ballou already had the arguments to say you're wrong. He influenced Theodore Parker. Theodore Parker, in talking about civil disobedience, wrote eloquently about just and unjust laws. Does that sound familiar? Because Theodore Parker and his theology and his actions influenced the early developers of the civil rights movement. His theology was theology that Dr. King studied and based his own work on. At the same time that Theodore Parker was hiding a woman in his own house, at the same time that Theodore Parker was advocating for the immediate abolition of slavery and saying that something like the fugitive slave law was absolutely unjust and should not be obeyed, many of his Unitarian and Universalist siblings were saying, as Dr. King heard 130 years later, just slow down. We too think slavery is wrong, but we've got to go slowly. Reverend Dr. Ezra Stiles Gannett, who was a prominent Unitarian leader in Boston, a friend, colleague, and often adversary of Theodore Parker, criticized Parker's stance, urged him to take on a more moderate view. Gannett himself supported the Fugitive Slave Act. And while he was an abolitionist, he believed we were going to have to abolish slavery in slow steps. Parker's arguments against moderation, Aidan Ballou, a few decades before's arguments against moderation, the hundreds and thousands of other people who argued against slavery, both African Americans and white Americans, who said the institution is morally bankrupt, it is a stain on the entire conscience of this nation. Those people were so often exhorted to just consider the other side, to come to a compromise. But there is no compromise, and there is no middle ground between enslavement and liberation. You can't just be a little bit enslaved or a little bit free. But we get so committed over and over in our history and in our present to surely there is a middle ground. Surely the middle ground will be better and more moral than taking a firm oppositional stance. If we could just find middle ground, then surely things will be better. And my dear ones, middle ground is a myth when it comes to justice. Moderation is great when it's how much are you eating and drinking today. Moderation is a moral failure when it comes to is somebody free. But we get tied up in it, in the argument of where is the compromise. And I have wondered this, and I've been grappling with it for years, really, but for months I've been thinking about this. And I turned to some of my previous academic work in English and language and rhetoric. And I was reminded in rhetoric and argumentation that there are all kinds of logical fallacies that you have to be aware of. You have to grapple with if you're going to enter into good faith dialogue. And one of those logical fallacies in argumentation is the fallacy of moderation. And if any of you have studied argumentation and rhetoric, you are familiar with it. But for those of us who might need a refresher, the fallacy of moderation is wrong because it starts with the supposition that if there are two viewpoints, they are both equally valid and equally true, and that somewhere in the middle is more truth. The fallacy also is predicated on a notion that there's maybe only two outcomes, and in committing to those, you forget and ignore all other perspectives, like, say, the perspective of a person who's enslaved and might have something to say about their own freedom. And the fallacy of moderation often leads us not just to equating two things as equal when they are not, of ignoring multiple perspectives. It also leads us to compromises in which nobody is happy and everybody is hurt. The Fugitive Slave Act of 1850, as I said, was a compromise. It was a compromise because abolitionists said, as America expands its territory, there can be no new slave states. We don't want slavery expanding at all. That's our stance. And of course, enslavers were like, no, we can't get richer that way. We want slavery expanded. And they argued about it, obviously, for decades. They reached a compromise in 1850 that rather than automatically allowing slavery to exist in new territories or automatically banning it, it could go to a popular vote, and that whoever in that territory voted, that's how it would go. The North was hoping, the abolitionists were hoping they could then control the narrative and stop the spread of slavery. And the South said, great, but here's what you're going to do then. You're going to pass a stricter Fugitive Slave Act. You're going to let us take anybody and everybody that we want. That was the compromise, my dear ones. Because they were operating under the fallacy of moderation, that there could be some middle ground between those two viewpoints. And the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850 caused even more harm. Thousands of people, including free people, were sent into slavery or re-enslaved. It was a compromise based on that fallacy that there can be two equal sides, and that is not always the case. We cannot argue for a middle ground when it comes to liberation and justice. Because when we do, what we are actually arguing for is to go on to cracking ice and fall in. We are arguing to drink poison as if the poison and the fresh water are the same, and they are not. They were not in 1837 or 1850 or 1963, and they are not here in 2025 when we are on the eve of an inauguration of an administration whose stated policies go against everything we say we value as Unitarian Universalists. An administration that has said in writing, they are going to take away the rights and the humanity of people. People in this room, people watching us online, people that you and I love, we are all in danger. And like those moderates in 1837 and 1850 and 1963, if we think our proximity to power will somehow save us, it won't. Because the compromise of holding fascism and hatred in the same equality as if it has the same moral authority as calls for liberation is poison. And the lessons from our past as Americans, especially white Americans, our past as Unitarian Universalists, calls us to be really, really clear that the stories we tell have to encompass our wholeness. Because we can be proud to claim Aidan Ballou and Theodore Parker as our ancestors, but my dear ones, we must also, in the same breath, in the same bodies, and with tension and care, hold that Ezra Steins Gannett is also one of our ancestors, to hold that our ancestors also sat in pews and said, I can't do anything about it, and I wish people would stop making me uncomfortable with talking about how hard their lives are. We cannot give in to false compromises that leaves people behind. We cannot give in to false compromises, a false moderation, a false middle ground that demands that Black people continue to accept second-class citizenship in this nation. We cannot give in to a false moderation that says, you know what, you gay and queer people would be fine if you just had a few less rights and I didn't have to see you in public. That is not morally right, and whether it is laws that we pass or the conversations we allow to go unchallenged, it is a false middle ground to say, I will just let you, person spouting hate, have your argument have the same weight as the person over here demanding to be free. The other hard part of rejecting, though, this false notion of the moral superiority of a middle ground is how. How do we reject dehumanizing, demonizing, immoral ideas, stances, and policies while still holding with compassion and care the people in front of us who hold those views? That is our challenge as a people. Our challenge is to engage in practices that help us, as we've talked about this year, understand that conflict can be transformational. But as Dr. King said, we don't have peace with an absence of tension. That's a false peace. So we have to be willing to have hard conversations, but we have to have them with empathy, understanding that the person in front of us has a story that is true to them, even if we understand that story to be false. We don't have to give weight to people's ideas, to have empathy for their humanity. Having empathy for the human person in front of us doesn't require us, though, to move into the false middle ground of their viewpoints. The Indigo Girls are one of my favorite bands. Some of you know that. I have their music here. They have a great song from their album called Become You. And the song is also the title of the album, Become You. And Amy Ray wrote it as a reflection on her own life as a queer Southerner. She's from Atlanta, Georgia. As a queer Southerner having to grapple with the realities of the homophobia directed at her all her life, and the racism that she witnessed as a white Southerner. And the refrain of the song says, the center holds, so they say, but it never held too well for me. I won't stop short of common ground that vilifies the trodden down, because the center held the bonded slave for the sake of industry, and the center held the bloody hand of the executioner man. It took a long time to become you, she writes. It took us a long time to become this nation, to become the individuals here in this room, to become the community that we are. And we might want to cling, particularly as many of us, not all of us, but many people in this room, probably many people watching us online, as middle-class white people, to the idea that if I just listen a little harder to my grandpa and my uncle and my dad and my sister and my neighbor, I'll reach a middle ground with them. But our job isn't to go where the enslavers are. It's to invite them to come here where we are. I mentioned Ezra Stiles Gannett, the minister who supported the Fugitive Slave Act, who argued for moderation and said, we'll get there eventually. In 1850, very publicly criticized Theodore Parker and others for their, what he considered, as I said, in his words, immoderate stance. But in 1854 in Boston, Ezra Stiles Gannett witnessed the arrest of a freed black man named Anthony Burns, who got returned, he had escaped the South, he got returned to slavery and died. And Ezra Stiles Gannett was faced with the real human need. Not just some theory about laws should be obeyed because that makes us good citizens, but the effects of an unjust law on the human person in front of him. And while he continued to say, we must not vilify the people who oppose us, he shifted his stance and began to very publicly argue against both the Fugitive Slave Act and argue for immediate abolition. He recognized that his middle ground served nobody. We too must learn these lessons over and over and over again. I hate to tell you, but as Dr. King said, progress is not linear. We are not rolling in on the wheels of inevitability. We have to do the work again and again and again, and that is why we need each other. We need each other in this community, in this church, in this congregation, in the partnerships we already have and that we will deepen in the days to come, because you all, we're being invited to drink poison, and we cannot do it. The center does not hold. And so we, with love, with compassion and empathy, we have to hold each other. May it be so, and amen. Our closing hymn today is Building a New Way, number 1017 in your hymnal. I chose this intentionally as our hope for what we are facing in the days and weeks to come, that together we are part of a long lineage of building a new way. And we are committed to that. There is sadness, there is fear, and there is real active hope. Please rise in body or spirit and join us in singing.
Song
As you go out into the world today, take a little hope with you. Remember, you are held in love. Remember, you are not alone. Remember, we can and we will fill our every need. We'll extinguish our chalice this morning with our usual chalice words. They're in your order of service and on the screen. We extinguish this flame, not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Yeah, cheers!